Hello everybody, welcome to Coding 101. My name is Skutlo. In today's video, we're going to be doing a card game using React JS. As you can already see from the screen, we're going to be using React JS to build our card game. And I'm going to be introducing a very important and significant element to our project today, the fact that I'm actually going to be using Tailwind CSS in order to style our project. Many of you might be familiar with Tailwind CSS and many of you might not be familiar with Tailwind CSS, but if you're not familiar with Tailwind CSS, this is the perfect video to really help you catch up to speed, get up to speed with what Tailwind CSS is all about. It's a very simple CSS framework that is quite popular these days. I see many developers today using Tailwind CSS, and so I would highly recommend that you use it. After using it, I don't think I could ever go back to anything else, unless I really need to use a different framework. But otherwise, it's a really good CSS framework. It's a utility-first CSS framework that is packed with classes that allow you to build any design directly to your mockup. So that's the thing about Tailwind CSS, is that you don't have to have a separate class. You can just style your components or style your code or your elements in the same file. So in simple words, it is a utility-first CSS framework that simply allows you that simply provides a deep catalog of CSS classes and tools that let you easily get started styling your website or your application. So we're going to be using that to build our card game. But before we continue with our video, I would like to encourage you to subscribe to the channel. Please make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you like the video, and if you have any comments or you have any questions, please make sure that you leave them in the comments section. But most importantly, do not forget to subscribe. Alright, so let's get started with our video. So remember that we're going to be building a card game using React JS today, and I just want to show you a bit of how the card game is actually supposed to look. I have the card game over here. So this is the objective of the card game, is that you're supposed to click on these cards that you see here, but you're not supposed to click on the same card twice. And so if you click on the same card twice, then it's practically game over. So you're supposed to click as many unique cards as you can find. And if you click a unique card, that is a point. But if you click the same card twice, then that would essentially mean that you've lost. Now, the trick about this game is that every time you click a card, then the cards are shuffled, sort of confuse you or something. So if I were to click on this pony over here, then everything inside of there is shuffled, sort of to trick you. So what I need to make sure is that I don't click on this card again. So you can see that because I clicked on that card, that's a score. And if I click on a different card again, that's also a score, and if I click on another different one, it's a score. But if I go back to the same card that I started with, you will notice that now the game is over. You can see over here on the title that the game is over. I cannot proceed anymore because that game is over. And over here I have a reset button that simply resets the game. So now I can start again. I can click over here and do that. But if I click again, of course, it's game over. And notice that if I click game over, nothing happens. I can click these cards as much as I want, but because the game is over, that means I cannot continue and the score is not incremented because of that very reason. But the moment we click reset over here, everything is reset. I can start the game again. So I call this the zebra memory card game, and that's only because I have zebra pictures, but it's famously known as the memory card game. And so we're going to be trying to design this using React JS. So it's fairly simple to design. I don't think it's anything too complicated. So I hope you have your hands ready to get started coding this. So now the first thing that we need to do, of course, is we need to start our React JS project. And after that, we need to install our Tailwind CSS package or framework into our project. And if you go to the Tailwind CSS website, tailwindcss.com, they instruct you on how to insert Tailwind CSS on your project. So I had already started my React JS on a terminal, as you can see over here. So what I'm going to try to do now is that I'm going to follow these steps, and I'm going to try and insert a Tailwind CSS into our React JS project. So I'm going to just stop this for a while. So the first thing that I need to do, of course, I need to say npx create React app. I've already done that. I've already got into my project folder, and now what I need to do is I need to install Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and Auto Prefixer. If you're not familiar with Post CSS and Auto Prefixer, you might want to do a bit of research on that, but honestly it doesn't really matter that much. So I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna click, did I copy that? Let me see if I copied that. I'm gonna try and copy it again, and then I'm gonna put it over here. Hopefully it agrees with me. It seems to not want to agree with me, so I'm gonna just type it down. Yeah, my command prompt is pretty much acting up, so I'm just gonna have to say npm install development Tailwind CSS Post CSS Auto Prefixer, like that. So I hope I've written that well, and I'm just gonna pause the video to allow it to install those packages. So I've managed to successfully install those packages, and if you had noticed, I had made a mistake, and on Auto Prefixer I had put a 2 at the end. So the next thing that I need to do is to npx Tailwind CSS init-p. I'm just going to copy this. So this is just as simple as copying these things. There we go, there goes my command line again, acting up for no apparent reason. There we go. And so what this is going to do is essentially it's going to sort of like initialize the Tailwind CSS on your project. So what it's going to do is going to create this file over here, which is a configuration file for Tailwind CSS. And it's also going to create a configuration file for Post CSS. And so yeah, so these files will be created on your folder structure. As you can see, they're over here. They've been successfully created. And so let's see what we need to do next. So this information once again is available on tailwindcss.com. So we need to come over here and we need to configure our template path. So we need to come over here on our tailwind.config.js. There's this part over here called content. So what you're doing there, you're just instructing the Tailwind compiler which files that it needs to work on, because like not every file is going to be maybe you want certain files to be omitted, you know, because maybe you want a certain portion of your project to use Tailwind CSS and you want certain files not to use Tailwind CSS, so or certain folders not to use Tailwind CSS. So in this part of the tailwind.config.js is whereby you specify which folders should be used or should be done with should Tailwind CSS look at. So we're gonna come over here, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to just tell you in a minute what this essentially does. It tells Tailwind CSS to go into our src folder, and inside of our src folder, any file called with an ending, with an extension, JS, JSX, TS, or TSX, all those files, there's probably some Tailwind CSS in there, so I need you to watch out for those files. So that is as easy as that. And I believe if we go back to the Tailwind CSS guideline, that is practically complete. Oh, no. Before we do that, we need to copy these directives, and we need to go to src index. We need to come over here, get rid of this, and we need to put this in there. And so this is whereby you sort of like specify your own special type of Tailwind CSS, because Tailwind CSS has some special classes that do certain type of design. So if you want a button to look a certain way, there's a class that is responsible to make it look a certain way. So there's already a pre-configured color inside of Tailwind CSS. But this one over here, this file over here, allows us to pre-configure our own type of colors. Maybe we want a certain color, and so we would use index.js to configure those types of colors that you see over there. All right, and I believe that once we're done doing that, then we're done. We can start our project. Let me go back to my terminal. I like having a separate terminal. Because it just like it's not all jumbled up, or it's not all mixed up with the code. So I just like having it on the side so I can deal with it separately than having to deal with it. So that if I'm doing a project on my Visual Studio, I like to have as much space as possible. So just seeing the terminal at the bottom of my Visual Studio is just a little bit something that I'm just not used to and something that I don't prefer. But it just goes by preference. It's not something that is actually that you should do if you don't want to do it. It's not going to make your code break or something. So our project is starting up. So while it's starting up, let's just get rid of all the other things that we have in there. Let's get rid of the Tailwind and the previous one. So there's our project, and this is how our project is supposed to look at the end of the day. Okay, cool. So let's go to our folder structure, and we're just gonna come over here, and we're gonna create a folder called components. And inside of components, we're gonna create a folder called maybe, I don't know, cards or card game. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm gonna say cards. Yeah, I'm gonna just say cards, and then that's about it. And then inside of cards, I'm gonna create some components inside of there, and these components, excuse me, these components are going to be card.js. So this is the card that we're going to be seeing in our file. Let's make sure that that is inside of the card folder, because sometimes when Visual Studio does this, you wonder if the component is inside of component or is inside of the file that you just created. So I'm going to just like broaden this up and just make sure that that card.js file is inside of the cards folder. So that's good. And inside of there, we're going to also create something called card container. So this is just going to contain our overall game. And then inside of here, we're also going to create a card header. So what I usually do and what I advise all my developers is to always break down a project into smaller sort of like segments. And so I'm just going to go to the project that you see over here. So this is what we're actually trying to do, is that we're trying to break it down into smaller components so that we can handle them. So we have this heading over here that you see, and that's what we're trying to do, is that we're trying to just like have this header component on its own, and then we're also trying to have this entire list grid that you see over here, this card grid that you see over here on its own. So this one, we're going to call it maybe something like card list. And then we're going to have another component that essentially encapsulate everything that concerns this card that you see over here. So every time when you're trying to create a React project, always try to break down a project into smaller components so that you can deal with them individually. Don't try to cram everything into like one component. I would highly advise against that. I know sometimes a component is going to be just a small thing, but as long as it does what it's supposed to do, then you need to just like separate it from the rest. So that's what we're trying to do here with our folder structure. We've created the card header, and now we're going to create the card list, like we have already said. So we're going to just say card list.js, and then we're going to create I believe that's about it. We have the card, we have the card container, we have the card header, and we have the card list. Yeah, and that's fine. And I'm going to create another file over here, and I'm going to call it variables.js. So this is where I'm going to store my variable, but in particular, this is where I'm going to store my image addresses, my image URLs. So I have a couple of images, these zebra images, or zebra, however you pronounce it, these images that you see over here, I actually got them from freepik, from image.freepik. freepik.com. So just head out to them. This is where I got these images from. So if you're looking to work on a couple of things, they're not sponsoring me to say this, but it's a good platform to get like some free pics to use in your project, and there are also premium pictures in there as well. Okay, I've said enough. They should practically be paying me for saying all this. But yeah, this is where I got these images from. So over here, I'm just going to create a sort of a constant that essentially contains all these links that you see over there. I'm going to call it card images, and the reason why I export it is because I want to use these images on a different file altogether. So I had already compiled a list of all these URLs, so I'm just going to put them in over here. So you can see that it is just a list of JSON objects, and each JSON object contains an ID of that image and the URL. So this is just a self-made ID. It's not something that comes with free pick or anything. So I just made that free pick to be sort of like the primary key for the images. So it's just an array of JSON objects that contain that each object contains the ID and the URL for each individual unique image. So that's it about the variable folder. Now let's get started with the card folder. And just make sure that we've started this project, right? All right, cool. So I'm just gonna say RFC. If you're not familiar with what RFC is, make sure you watch my Visual Studio extension video, and it will teach you more about some of these extensions that can really make your life easy. I'm gonna go to the card container, practically do the same thing. And I'm gonna go to my header and practically do the same thing in there as well. I'm gonna go to my card list, do the same thing. So now we have each of these 4 components over there. So I'm going to go to my, start off with my card, and let's just see what our card looks like over here. And if you look at our card, the picture is in the center. It's sort of like there's a border over here. This, I assume this is a border, and then there's a picture in the center over here, and then there's this green, I believe it's either the background of the card or anything like that. So it's a fairly simple card to do, and we're actually going to be doing this using a Tailwind CSS. So inside of our card, what we're simply going to do is that we already have our div. We're just going to create an image tag. It's as simple as that, and because it's a self-closing element, and we're just going to create our class name, and this is where we're going to be adding our Tailwind CSS over here. So remember, in Tailwind there's some classes. So a class like this, flex, is actually represents it's the same as saying so doing like this is just the same as, let's just do it with our inline styling. So this is just the same as saying display flex. So it's the same as that. So of course I have to put this in quotes, display flex. And we're also going to justify everything in the center. So we're going to just say justify center like this. And if you hover around this, you can see the equivalence, the CSS equivalence of that Tailwind CSS class or tool or whatever you call that. So you can see the equivalence of just saying justify center is equivalent to saying justify content to the center. So each time we do this, these Tailwind classes, I'm just going to hover about them so that you can see the equivalence. So I want them to have a special type of width. I want them to have 250 pixels, and this is how you do it. This is describing the width. If I hover over that, you can see the CSS equivalence. And if I come over here and I say height, I'm just going to put it in these brackets over here, and I'm also going to say 250 pixels. So it's going to be sort of like a square type of thing. I'm also going to give it a border radius, and in order to do a border radius, let me just put this class over here so that you can see this properly. For the moment, I'm just going to put it to the I'm gonna just put it to the left so that you can see everything properly. So, and then I'm gonna just say rounded LG. So this is just similar to saying border radius 0.5 rem. So, and then I'm gonna have a border. Remember, there's a thick border around this, and I'm just gonna have that border to be sort of like 10 pixels. Then I'm gonna put margin of 6. And then I want a hovering effect. I want every time you hover over that, the opacity should be able to sort of decrease to 80%. So I'm going to just say 0.8 opacity. It's going to be 80%. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much it for our Tailwind CSS of describing that class that you see over here. Yeah, that's definitely about it. And we're going to give it maybe an alt name, maybe of something like. Or should we give it an alt name, because I know our CSS compiler is going to complain. So we're just going to say zebra image. And I'm just going to indent this properly so that you can see how everything works. So far our image does not have an SRC tag or SRC attribute, but I'm going to put in an SRC attribute so that you can just essentially see how this thing works. So I'm going to take in one of these URLs that you see over here, and I'm going to go to my card component. Let me just lower this down. Card component, and I'm just going to put it in there. And I want to see how my card looks like, and I want to see how my card looks like. I'm going to go to my app.js. I'm going to get rid of everything that is inside of here, even the app.js itself. I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to put my card over here. I'm going to say card. If I click, you will see that the card component is automatically imported from the very top. And so if I go to our file structure, if I go to my there you go. if I go to our project on the browser, you can see there's our card over there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. But I think one thing that we've maybe have forgotten is the padding. We're supposed to have a bit of padding in there. So that's the thing that I noticed. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say P, which represents padding in Tailwind. And I'm going to give it a padding of 8 pixels, as you can see over here. So 2 represents 8 pixels. And if we go back to our browser, there's a bit of a padding that you can see over here. You see this white space that you see over here? That is the padding. So we've managed to successfully create our card. So now what we're going to do is that we need to be able to create like sort of a card list. But we cannot create a card list. Actually, before we create a card list, I would suggest that we implement our header before we move on to that. So I'm going to go to our header over here, and I'm going to create inside of here an h1 tag, which is going to be sort of our logo. And remember, our logo is zebra memory game, zebra or zebra. And then after that, I'm going to have maybe like a div component, because I want to put in my scores, the reset button, and whether the game is still active or it's game over. So that's the information that I'm going to put inside of this div container. And I'm going to have a p tag inside of there, and this p tag is going to capture something like play. Okay, so I'm going to just say play. Yeah, let's make it a little bit dramatic and put in maybe some emojis inside of there. There we have our emojis. And if we click play, no, actually that is our play title. And then inside of here, we're also going to have like a button. So this is going to be a simple button. We're going to just say reset over here. It's going to be reset. And then I forgot about the score tag. The score. Okay, so it's going to be score and maybe 0, because we don't have anything at the present moment. So I don't know if I should put yes. That will suffice. So now if we go back to our project, actually not before you go back to our project, if we want to see this header, that means we're going to have to call this header over here. So I'm going to just say card header, and that's as simple as that. Go back to my project, there's my card header. As you can see, it doesn't look really appetizing in terms of the UI, so that's what we're going to work on. We're going to work on that UI to make it a little bit more appealing. We're going to use Tailwind CSS in order to do this. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're just going to say class name, and I'm going to just put in our text center. I'm going to pause this video because this is just a simple way of implementing Tailwind CSS, and our project is not, or should I don't know, should I pause the video or should I not pause the video? Would you like to see the Tailwind CSS aspect of this? Tell you what, I'm going to fast speed this process over here, and if you want to see how slowly and how the Tailwind CSS works, you can just slow down this video. So I'm just going to carry on with my Tailwind CSS. I'm going to say font extra bold, then I want the text to be white, and then I also want the text font size to be 6XL. And I want a margin between the horizontal margin to be 8, so this is how you implement the horizontal margin. You can see over there, margin top and margin bottom. Yeah, that's about it. And then if I come here to the score, I just simply wanted to, oh no, we need to implement our div. Our div means we need to declare everything inside of this div as a flex item. So I'm going to say flex, next row, and I'm going to say justify evenly, and I'm going to say margin 3. And if I come to the text, the score part of it, once again, class name, and then I'm going to just say text, XL. I'm going to give it a certain type of color. So these are the colors, these are the pre-built or inbuilt colors, slate 100. Then I'm going to come over to this p tag over here, and I'm going to give it like a font weight of extra bold. I'm going to say text XL. I'm going to give it a certain type of color, text slate 100. Or did I say text salt? Text slate 100. Alright. And then I'm also going to need to sort of like configure the button as well. This one I'm just going to copy in. Class name. Ooh, what happened? Okay. So it's going to be class name as equals to all of these classes that you see over here. Alright, so and if we go back to our project, let's see how our thing looks. So the reason why it looks like this, you can't see it, is because we actually need to change the background of this, and I want it to look a little bit emerald. So we're going to have to like sort of like change the way that background color looks, and in order to do that, we're going to go over to our folder structure, and we're going to go to app.css. We don't really need any of these. Any of these do not apply, actually. So we don't actually need them. But I think we might need this .app. No, we don't need it as well. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm going to just say everything inside of there needs to have a specific background color, and I'm going to give it this sort of greenish emerald, greenish bluish type of background color. So if we go back to our project, you'll see that our background has now changed significantly. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need to now play around with the card list. So we've done the header and we've also done the card itself. We need to do the card list, but in order to do the card list, we need that list that we have declared here on the variable side of things. Now I want this list to be a controlled list, because remember, we're going to be shuffling this list. So in order to control it, we need to put it in a state object so that we can be able to have the same consistency throughout all the components. So I want to be able to share this list throughout all the components. So I'm going to declare the state over here in our app.js. Normally I would recommend just creating a different component to store all this type of information, but for now we're going to be putting this information in our app.js. So I'm going to just say const, and I'm going to say images, I'm going to say set images, I'm going to say use state, and I'm going to put the card images. If we click that, it's automatically imported at the very top. Images, set images. So what I want to do is that I want to be able to share these images. Remember, actually, I should be able to put this card header and this card should be on the card container, actually. So at the end of the day, what we're going to have over here is the card container. Card container, like this. So this is what we're going to have at the end of the day. So we're going to have to put everything inside of our card container. So our card header is going to be in here. Card header. And in here also is going to be our card list. So yeah, that's about it that needs to be in there. And then our card list is going on, and our card component is going to be inside of our card list. So what we want to try to do is that we want to share these images across all the components that you see over there. One way of doing it, of course, is prop drilling, is by using props to pass on this variable to other components as the components go along. But we're going to be using use context in today's lesson. So in order to do that, we need to come over here at the very top of our file. We're going to say const, and we're going to just say card context. If you're interested in a use context tutorial, please just mention it in the comment section. I'll be happy to give you a tutorial regarding use context if you're not familiar with it. So I'm going to do that, and I'm hoping that it's going to import it at the very top for me. First, let's get rid of these import statements that no longer have any effect. And inside of here, inside of our create context, we're going to put in maybe our card images, even though I don't think that's necessary. So we're going to have our card images in there, and now we're going to have to create like a provider. So in order to create a provider which is going to sort of provide that information that we want to all the other cards, so we're going to just say card context dot provider. I'm going to say value, and we're going to give it those images. So we need a closing tag for this card context provider. This is fine. So now our images state is being shared across all the card containers, but we need to actually retrieve those images. So we're going to do that using the card list. So we need to come over here to the card list, and we need to use the use context, or the variables that we've stored in our context, and we just need to say, and that, remember that state is called images, so that is why we are destructuring it as such. We're going to say use context, and over here we're going to call in that specific context, which is the card context, as such. And yeah, just like that. Now we have access to that images state. And then if we come over here now, we can use that array of images by just saying images.map img and get that card component in here. We need to make sure that it's imported at the very top, and I didn't notice that it didn't import. So let me just do it again. So I'm going to just say card, and if I click, it should be able to automatically import at the very top. So, and then inside of here, I want a specific key. I'm going to give it the key, I'm going to give it the image key. I'm going to just say img, and then I'm going to give it an ID, the ID with regard to the image, so that is obviously going to be img.id. I'm going to give it the URL, so obviously the URL is going to be image.url, and just like that. But I want to structure these cards. So I just want to be able to structure these cards in a grid-like manner. I'm going to use Flexbox to do that. You can use CSS Grid, but I much prefer Flexbox. So I'm going to use Tailwind CSS again. I'm going to just say Flex Row, and I'm going to say Flex Wrap. And did I declare Flex? Okay, yeah. I'm going to justify everything evenly, and yeah, I think that should work. So it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Let's make sure that we don't have any errors on our terminal. So we don't, except for all these errors that you see over here. We've declared a logo and we're not using it, so get rid of that logo. And we're going to use the set images in a while. So now we've created our card list. Remember, we have not actually configured these props on the card component, so that's what we're going to have to do now. We're going to have to go to our card component and configure those props. So because it's a prop, we're going to just structure it at the very top. We're going to just say URL, ID, and what we're simply going to do is we're going to say src instead of hard coding this URL. Instead of hard coding this URL, we're going to get that URL that we've just gone through the props. And make sure that everything is properly indented. So yeah, I suppose this should work. Let's go to our project and let's see. And there you go. So everything is in like a grid-like manner. But what I'm seeing is that our heading that you see over there is not actually big enough, and I want it to be a little bit more pronounced. So I'm going to go to the header part of this and figure out what went wrong over here. It's supposed to be a bit bigger and a little bit more pronounced. So I did say text.excel, oh, the S. So I'm going to get rid of that S. And my assumption is that it's supposed to be fine now. So of course, the game that we've created looks a little bit similar to the one that we have in the left here. So I want it to look a little bit different so that we can know that we are doing a different game, so that you're not confused whether or not this is the copy that I had made previously, or this is the copy that we're doing, or this is the project that we're doing now. So I'm going to change actually the background of this on the app.css. I'm going to make it a little bit bluish. That's what I want to do. I'm going to make it a little bit bluish. Alright, and there you go. This should be fine. So, yeah, cool. So now we have a bit of differentiation between the one that I had created previously and the one that I'm creating now with you. So we've made that grid-like list with tailwind.css. And the good thing about this is even if you close it, if you decrease the width of the screen, then it still works properly because it's Flexbox. So now the thing that we need to do is to work on the shuffling. So what I need to happen is that also, what I want to bring your attention to is that every time I hover over here, you can see that the opacity is reduced. So what I want to happen is that every time I click on this, I want these images to be able to shuffle. In order to do that, I need to implement the shuffle method. And I'm going to create that shuffle method on our app.js file. So let's just go to our app.js. And what we're going to do is that we're going to create a method, and we're going to call it shuffle images. I'm going to just say const shuffle images, and I'm going to do it like this. And so what it essentially does, it shuffles images and returns images, it updates the images state with shuffled images. So in order to shuffle my image array, I'm going to need the help of Lodash. So if you're not familiar with Lodash, then you really need to get acquainted with Lodash. If you go over here, you can see that a lot of people use Lodash. Look at that, 45 million people each week downloading Lodash. So what essentially is Lodash? Lodash is a JavaScript library that provides utility functions for common programming tasks using a functional programming paradigm. It builds upon another library actually called underscore, the underscore.js library. So it has several built-in utility functions that make our coding life much more easier and much more cleaner. Instead of writing common functions again and again, which is really frustrating, the task can be accomplished with one single line of code. So in this instance, if I wanted to shuffle these images, that means I would have to create a shuffle function. And that's going to take a couple lines of code, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to think how to shuffle images. I just want something that's going to shuffle the images for me. So I'm going to have to go over here to my project. In the meantime, I'm just going to terminate it, and I want to install Lodash. I'm going to pause the video and I'll wait for Lodash to finish installing. And then after it has finished installing, I'm going to run my project once again. npm start. And now let's go back to our project and come over here, practically refresh this to make sure that we are indeed in a project. Okay, there it is. So now we're going to go to Lodash, and what I want to do with Lodash is that I want the shuffle method. So before I do anything, I need to import dash from Lodash. And what I want to do is that I want to shuffle my images. So that's what I want to do. I just say dash dot shuffle, and then I'm going to put my card images in there. So this is going to return a shuffled up array, and I'm going to take that array and then I'm going to set it to a state. So it's going to be our new state. So what I want to do with this function, I also want to give it to our context provider so that it can supply that method to our card. So what we want to do is that every time our card is clicked, we want that shuffle method to run. We want our cards to be shuffled. So I'm going to go to my card, and I'm going to get that method actually from the context. So I'm just going to simply say, come over here and say const shuffle images. I believe that is the name of the method. And I'm going to use context. I'm going to use the card context given to us over here, and just like that. So, and what we want to happen is that every time somebody clicks on a card, then those images are shuffled. So we implement an onClick event over here, and we put in our shuffle method, shuffle images, sorry. We put in our shuffle methods over here. Alright. So now what we expect to happen is that every time we click our images, or our images are shuffled. Okay, so it says over here, shuffle images is not defined. So something happened, maybe we didn't spell shuffle images correctly. Okay, there we go. So if we go back to our application, what I expect to happen is that every time I click, those images are shuffled accordingly. You can see my images are shuffled randomly, I must say. Now, what we want to happen is that once the game is over, then we want the shuffling to stop. And we want to make sure that an image is not clicked twice. So we want to sort of like keep a record of the images that have already been clicked. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to create a state called clicked. And this is going to just be an array that stores all the images, the IDs of all the images that have already been clicked. And I'm going to come over here, I'm going to put an array as the default state. And over here, I'm going to take in an ID. So every time somebody clicks, an ID is passed on to the shuffle function. And the shuffle function is going to check first if maybe that ID already exists inside of our clicked array. So I'm going to say clicked.include. I'm going to check that ID if it's in there. And if it's in there, then the game is over. So we just return. Or we can just have a state called game over. So we're going to have a state over here called game over. I'm going to say set game over. And I'm going to say state. And the first state, of course, it's false. But every time the game is over, we're going to just say set game over is equals to true. So now we want to check if the game is over, and if the card is already in the clicked array, then don't do anything. So I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to just say or. If the game is over, that means if game over is equals to true, or if the card is already included in the clicked array, then just return or set game over to be true. And so what I also want to do is that if the game is not over, if that card is not already inside of the clicked array, I want to actually add it to the clicked array. So in order to do that, I'm just going to say set clicked. And I'm going to do this, use my spread operators, and then I'm going to just add that ID, just like that. And also, while we're at it, I want to actually create a function for resetting the game. So I'm going to say function const reset game, because this is just a simple function to create. All we need to just say is set clicked. We need to refresh our clicked so that our clicked is now an empty array, and we need to set game over is equals to false, sorry, just like that. We need to add these methods to our value, to our context value. So first we need to add the reset method. Also, we don't need to add any other method because we already have our shuffle images. And I think we're going to need also the game over state. And so I'm just going to put the game over state over here. And I'm also going to put in the clicked. I don't know if I'm going to need it, but I think I am. So I'm just going to say clicked over here. So these are the values that I'm actually sharing. The values, so when I mean values, I'm not just saying variables, but I'm also saying functions. That's the good thing about use context, is that you can be able to share not just your functions, but you can also share your values. I mean, you can not just share your values, but you can also share functions as well, because remember, a function in JavaScript is a simple object. So now if we go to our card, we need to make sure that we're giving it the proper ID. If the game is over, then what should happen is that the shuffle method should no longer work. So now let's see if that works as we want. I'm going to click over here, click, click, and if I click the same thing twice, then you will notice that nothing is happening and nothing is being shuffled, because now we have programmed our application to take notice of if somebody has clicked, or if a user has clicked the same image twice. So I think that's about it. So now we need to make sure that we're keeping the score of all of this. And so keeping the score is as simple as just counting the number of images that have been clicked. So it's just like counting the number of elements inside of our clicked array. So I think that's probably why we shared the clicked array. We put it on the context on our context provider. So now we just go to our card header, and what we need to do is that over here we need to first we need to get our context. We need to come over here. We're going to need a couple of things. What we're going to need, of course, we're going to need the clicked, and what we're also going to need, we're going to need the game over, so that if the game is over, we can alert the user. And we're going to use that reset game method, so that we attach this method to the reset button. And just like the others, we're going to just say use context, and we're going to just say card context, I believe. Yes, I'm going to say card context. Let me just make sure everything has been imported appropriately. And so now the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to put our scoreboard properly. So in order to do that, what we would simply do is just click.length. It's as simple as that, honestly. And what we want to do again is that on the reset button, we want to say, just put this in perspective, on click, and we're going to just say on click reset game, like this. So now every time somebody clicks on the reset button, the game is reset appropriately. And now what we're left with is the play button. So we're going to handle this using some JSX expressions. So we're just going to say if game is over, if the game is over, like this, then what I need you to do is that I need you to tell the user that the game is over. In order to do that, I'm just going to say game over. I'm going to put this in strings. Game over, and I'm going to put in some sad emojis over there. And if the game is not over, then what you need to do is just continue playing. So make sure that we put this in quotes. So if game over is true, evaluates to true, then display game over. If game over evaluates to false, then display play. And just like that, I think everything is good now. If we go back to our game, let's just refresh this. And if we were to click, you'll notice that the score is now updating. You can see that the score is updating appropriately. If we were to click the same image again, guess what? The game is over. If we click over here, you will notice that the score is not even updating. So now what we're supposed to do is to, of course, reset this game so that we can start afresh. And so I'm just going to click over here on reset, and now we can play again, and you notice that the game is being played afresh. So unfortunately, we clicked the same image twice. So that's not what we wanted to do. But unfortunately, the game is over because you didn't follow the exact commands. So there is our zebra memory game, or this is our memory card game. I should fix the title, memory card game. That's our memory card game. It's as simple as that, implemented using React and Tailwind CSS. Was any of this confusing for you? Did you manage to understand how this game was implemented? If not, please make sure that you leave your comment in the comment section. I would really much appreciate that. And if you have appreciated this tutorial, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button, and make sure that you accept post notifications. Make sure that you like the video as well. Share the video, encourage your friends to watch it as well if you find it useful for them. Make sure that you just share it to them and just like say, hey, listen, there's an interesting game that was created using React and Tailwind CSS. I would very much appreciate that. So please remember to subscribe, like, and comment in the comment section. Other than that, I will see you next time on Coding 101.